Welcome to Real Herbalism Radio, recorded live at River Road Studios. Today's show is brought to you by Get Healthy Now with Candace.
Get healthy now, not later, not before, already now, and not tomorrow, now, right?
Okay, right now.
If you'd love to do a consult and look at ways that you can get more healthy in your life, that you can improve your current feelings of wellness and lifestyle, give me a shout. You can look me up at gethealthynow.com or gethealthynowwithcandace.com.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Occupy Medical.
Occupy Medical is changing. We have...
What?
Yes, I know. It's really weird, but I've always in the past said we're a street reach, and we're still doing street reach. We're just doing it a different way. We have a place in Springfield, and we also have a clinic that we have opened and have been doing for the last couple of months in Eugene, and that's the street reach part where we're specifically working with people that are unhoused. The clinic that we have in Springfield is a building, and we have two suites of it. And one part is for hygiene supplies and food for people that are struggling. They can just come in and get whatever they need. Mm-hmm. And then we have the other part, which is the medical part with the herbal part of it, and then the counseling as well as the integrated health part. And that is just because we have a place, just like anybody that's coming out of being unhoused to being housed, they find all of a sudden all of these survival skills that they needed to have time for. They don't need to have time for it anymore because, they got four walls around us, and that's the same thing for us. So it's been great to be able to burst out and do a whole bunch more projects. So
how can people contribute?
Well, we are a 501c3, and that is there's a bunch of information that we have on Facebook and Twitter and on our website at occupy-medical.org.
All right. And we're now, our next sponsor is Mud Paw Design House. It's, formerly Hunter Creation. This is the first time we're talking about it over the air, if you will. So Mud Paw Design House is a company that Candace and I run and own, and it is graphic design and website design. If you're looking for a website that will match your branding of your printed materials, we can help you out. Or if you have printed materials and need a website, we can help you out with that too. So let us know at mudpahdesignhouse.com.
That's a mud paw, like a dog paw. That's muddy.
Paw.design.com or mudpahdesignhouse.com.
That's cute.
Right. All right. And how about you, Sue?
What about me?
What do you bring to the table?
What do I bring to the table? Well, I've got two. Should I just talk about the two things real quick?
Sure.
I'll talk about Patreon first. So I mentioned before about Occupy Medical, and I do a lot of stuff just during the week working with people that I cannot bill them. I just can't. They don't have any money. But being a community herbalist, the work, I've been doing this for so long, the work just has to be done. So I am asking for people to donate to my Patreon account so that I can continue working with people. And with that kind of sponsorship, that means that I could also continue training other folks that want to open up clinics like we have. And I've been doing that. And I've just been kind of doing it for free. So we need community herbalism in this country, and I am willing to be the voice of experience. So I just need support from people. And you can go to my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/SueSierraLupe.
Okay. That's really cool.
Yep. That's just one of them.
Do you have any more? Do you have any supporters already?
So I do. I have a couple of wonderful supporters that have been brave enough to put in for one of them as a one-time supporter, and then the others are monthly supporters.
Nice.
Yep.
So all right. Did you have something else?
Very much. Yes. So there's also Sierra Lupe Herbal Consulting, and that's at gmail.com, and that is my business that I do herbal consulting, and that is for people get charged per hour for that one. So that's that. They get the same kind of service. And I can come to people's houses and do things online, and that's available. So you've heard the genius. Now you can have that in your life too.
All right. Ace High Heat Graphics, custom imprinted shirts and caps and everything else that you can wear. they're specializing in event wear. So if you are an herbal organization and you are putting on a fair or a festival and you need to have 200-300 shirts done, that Ace High Heat Graphics can help you out and save you a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing that Ace High Heat Graphics is doing is also doing branded wear for companies. So for within the company. So if you are a herbal organization and you have employees and people and volunteers that you want to have them all wearing like the same shirts, or they would like to support the company by purchasing a shirt, that's another thing that Ace High Heat Graphics does.
We're in fact we're doing a company store for a large client right now, so their employees can go there and buy their shirts. We did a promotion for that company, and all the employees liked the shirts so much that they wanted to buy them for workwear.
Nice.
So they said, "Can you help us with that?" So we're setting them up with an online store.
That's really cool. And with the political season brewing up, I'm sure there's a lot of people that would want their slogans written on their shirts too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right. And finally, the Herbal Nerd Society, for which we would not be able to do any of this.
Right.
Right.
Yes. We are thankful for the Herbal Nerd Society.
When I don't want to come here some days and record because I got other things to do, I just remember there's a bunch of Herbal Nerd Society members paying me to get here.
Yeah, I know. And they get content every single week. We put an article together. I've been banging my head against the keyboard this month for Spilanthes.
Right. Me too. That one's a challenging one because it's not as well promoted an herb.
Yeah.
Even though it is a really wonderful herb.
It really is. I mean, I use it in the clinic a lot, and doing all this research, like, man, I'm underutilizing this plant.
Right. Yes, and I'm doing the research on it, but it's challenging to find herbal energetics on it. It's pretty sparse because it's not a part of the traditional Ayurvedic or TCM pantheons, and it's certainly was probably used by traditional Western herbalists way back when, but there's not a ton on it. So I'm finding that really interesting.
Well, it's a fabulous plant. I remember being in the South. Just you cannot miss it because it's a little red dot. And it's I'm in love with it. So I'm learning things, and I love sharing the things I'm learning with other people.
So above and beyond the more advanced herbal articles for the Herb of the Month, we also have access to all of the old podcasts from which we realize today we've done this for about 6 years now. So we have 180 episodes, 160 of which are in the backlog. So you have 160 episodes of podcasts that you can get a hold of if you're the Practical or the Herbal Nerd Society member. And also you get an ad-free viewing experience. No pop-ups, no banner ads, no Google ads. It's just straight content.
Yep. And the Let's Talk series, where we have a section where people can listen to some of our guests give a specific information about their chosen topic.
That's right. All right, on with the show. When the weather's right and the herbs are calling, we herbalists love to get into the wild for a little wildcrafting, that is harvesting medicinal and food plants that grow in wild or semi-wild or uncultivated places. For the uninitiated, whether you're going into the forest, field, or desert, there are a few tips and rules for wildcrafting right. Today we're talking with Christina Sanchez, founder of Every Leaf Speaks, and Howie Brounstein of Columbine School of Botanical Studies, about wildcrafting in many environments properly. Now here are your hosts, Candace Hunter and Susier Lupe.
I'm Candace Hunter.
And I'm Susier Lupe. And welcome to Real Herbalism Radio. We have two guests. Look at the two of you. Oh, this is great.
Hi, Christina.
Hi.
Hi, Howie.
Hi.
So good to have you guys both back.
Oh, I'm very excited to be back on Real Herbalism Radio.
What a sweetie.
I'm glad that you're glad. And I bet you're glad that I'm glad that you're glad. Right?
Oh, I'm glad. I'm so glad. I'm glad.
Oh, nice. There's so many layers. That sounds great.
So many layers.
So we're going to talk about, now that we've gotten all this wild out there, now we can talk about wildcrafting.
Yeah.
And you two come from very different environments. Christina, you are a desert wildcrafter by nature. And you, Howie, you've been mostly here in the Pacific Northwest. Very different environment. And I know that you've wildcrafted in other places. So we're happy to have the both of you to kind of talk about what that looks like. So who wants to start? Should we flip a coin and see?
You start.
Okay, well, then in that case, I should say that many years ago, I wrote this Wildcrafting checklist that goes over a whole bunch of questions that wildcrafters should ask themselves before harvesting anything. Some of those questions are easy to answer, and some of those questions you can't answer them right away, but they're questions you want to think about as you're wildcrafting that might take you years to answer. But I wanted to mention that it is available downloaded from this site here at the bottom.
Which is the botanicalstudies.net site.
Well, how about your site?
Oh, my site?
Yeah.
Put a link on there.
Yeah.
Yes, it will be there.
Yeah, the
And it will be there.
Wildcrafting checklist.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good one. So what kind of things do you think are that everybody just kind of takes for granted when they say, oh, it's sustainably wildcrafted? And does that mean the same to you as it does to people that put that on the label?
I'm leery of sustainably wildcrafted. That's just me. I just don't think people understand what that means usually.
Right.
So what does that actually mean, or what should it mean?
What should it mean?
Yeah, what should it
What should it mean?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. What it would mean is that it's harvested in a way that the plants will continue to grow and that it wouldn't actually hurt the stand. Or perhaps it means that it improves the stand to harvest, which many plants are like that.
Yeah.
But that raises a whole bunch of ethical questions. Improving the stand is an example I'm really cautious about. Like when we teach in the Columbine School of Botanical Studies how to wildcraft, we take people through a whole year, and most of the time we're not wildcrafting.
Right.
So they're watching the plants from the time the snow is melting and the first plants are coming up, and they're going to the point where most of the plants are dying and are dead, and the snow is, or asleep for the year, and the snow is on the way. So they get this whole big picture of what's going on. But our object in the first few years of Columbines is to teach people how to make as minimal of an impact as possible. And to be able to see what's going on with the plants, to be able to understand what's going on. If we weren't going to be there and we didn't take anything, what would happen to that environment? What's going on? What changes are going on? Those types of things. When it comes to wildcrafting food and wildcrafting medicine, a lot of what I see happening now around here is the concept of harvesting food, indigenous food plants in ways that increase the stand, which is true. But the question is, if you're going to go ahead and increase a plant population to make it so that there's more of them,
right,
then you're also saying that there's other plants that you're eliminating.
Right.
So I'm not saying that's right or wrong. That's not an issue. The issue is if you're going to make an impact, are you aware of what that impact is?
Yeah.
And I think that when it comes to sustainable wildcrafting, these are questions that a lot of people don't see. For example, I'll give you an example. You can you can take a seed. You can say, well, or some plants. You can say, well, I think skullcap should grow on this should grow in this river. It grows in all the local rivers.
Right.
So I'm going to go and plant some skullcap in there. I'm going to go and plant this food that I want and plant it in there. I'm going to throw out some seeds. Mm-hmm. And people are like, well, this is a good thing. And however, indigenous people did that all the time. They went to places where they wanted food to grow, and they brought food with them, and they planted it there. And hundreds and hundreds of years later, to people whose eyes can see, you can see this impact. You can see, people have in the past, many generations before me, brought plants here.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with that. But people think a lot before, like, I'm not going to cut down that big tree. It's going to take hundreds of years to grow back.
Right.
But they're not thinking, I'm going to plant this plant here, and in hundreds of years later, people will be able to see that I planted this.
I'll bring lemon balm to this riparian area.
That's right.
It does so well.
Yeah. And even if it doesn't take over, even if it's something that stays within the ecosystem without taking over, or just is a plant that doesn't actually belong there,
It's definitely
it's still changing it, and that's not good nor bad. But
it just is. Yeah.
Before you make the impact, we would want to be able to see the impact. That's why, for me, it's when I think about here we are on a public radio, and all these people I know. I think that your subscribers now are like 700,006 or something.
Many
yes,
numbers.
And it's like, with that many people thinking about going out wildcrafting, whether you're in the desert or you're in the Northwest or the Southeast, wherever you are, all the food and medicine plants you want are there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And especially people who aren't actually experienced in wildcrafting that are going out, the concept is to work on those plants that thrive with disturbance
Yes.
and grow in areas that are disturbed. You get the same spiritual connection by harvesting bed straw out of a local park here, well, not a local park, but in a place that you'll be allowed to harvest. That's clean, your front yard.
My front yard.
Right.
Yeah.
If you harvest bed straw in a wild place that's semi-wild, you get the same kind of connection with the earth, and you still get the same good medicine that you would going out to like a pristine 5-hour drive in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
So.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I like about your list is that in order to answer many of those questions, you really have to know the plant.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people, they'll see something on the internet like, well, I'm going to go get that plant because it solves every problem that I possibly have. And so they go running out there. And if you can't answer the question about, you talked about elevation, which is a big thing here in the valley, since there's so many different elevations to choose from, maybe that's not such a big deal in the desert where the variations of elevations are not such an issue, but the if you don't know the answer to that, maybe you don't know the plant enough to be using it.
Mm-hmm.
So getting to know these plants is the first thing, and that may mean going and just observing them first, looking at them and seeing how they grow without you don't have to stick everything in your mouth. We're not 3 years old.
Yeah. Well, you hope so.
You hope so. Yeah. Some of the 3-year-olds, they are out there and they're definitely wildcrafting. I've watched my children wildcraft, stick all kinds of things in their nose and eyes and everything else. But you have to get to know it before it becomes proper medicine, and that's part of that checklist.
That's something that you've been working with too, haven't you, Christina?
Yeah, definitely. There's been, because wildcrafting has become very popular lately, and there's a lot of people that are posting about it that don't know, even like just gathering wild food. There's been a lot of courses being taught by chefs.
Ancestral skills and all of that
stuff.
That's
really big. That's really big right now.
Yeah.
But so that there's been a more interest lately in people wanting to wildcraft without even knowing about the plants.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They just read something out of a book and they want to go and gather that plant without developing a relationship with it and without understanding the land or where it grows. And we do have in different elevations, we do have plants that grow at different elevations in the desert, because where I'm at slightly over 3,200 feet. And then if I go up higher, different elevations, not that I gather in the national park, but then I get up higher, then I see different plants.
Right.
Whereas, the pinyon doesn't grow right next to me, but if I get up higher in the pinyon woodlands, then I'm going to see, about 4,000 feet. I mean, the park is quite up high. So you do have slight variations where you have to know the elevations and what plants are in that area. So I do that when I'm gathering like yerba santa, or if I'm gathering, if I want sagebrush, I have to go at different elevations. So I have to know that land, and a lot of that takes getting familiar with it.
Yeah. And the harvesting in the desert seems like it would make a really potentially great impact, because there aren't as many plants. Like in the Pacific Northwest lush valley, you can't walk even across a paved area without stepping on plants. They're everywhere because there's so much water and it's lush.
And they can recover very quickly because of all of the water.
Exactly.
So you have a lot of plants in the desert, but the recovery is slower.
It's slower. So even though, for instance, creosote bush, Laurea tridentata, there's this one stretch off the 62 freeway where you literally get into a daze because you see Laurea after Laurea. It's this zone of Laurea, and people don't understand how medicinal that plant is. There's a lot of it, but people are coming out to look for like yerba mansa, and they don't understand, where she grows. So I know when I come across yerba mansa, I'm like so excited to see that she's there.
Right.
Because you don't see her very often. But people overlook the common plants. The Sahara mustard that grows out there, people overlook that and they don't consider it to be food or medicine. It can be both. I use it a lot to cook with. And so they always want to go for these plants like desert lavender. I think creosote bush is becoming more popular.
Yeah.
And the more they read about it, and it's basically people read about it or there's a blog about it, and that's what spikes the interest in it.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, because then people don't understand how they can cause an impact, even though it's such a, there's so much of it where I'm at, they still don't know how to gather properly, or they don't understand the impact that they could have on the environment. And because we don't get much rain, so you have to be mindful of where you're gathering from. The basanda is another one that people want to gather from. And there's certain areas that I see it, you have to know where it grows. Yeah. And you have to be mindful of it, because even though it might be growing in that one wash that you're at, it's it could be sparse. So you have to watch the plants, like you said. You have to observe them and become familiar with the area because you can wipe it out if you're not careful.
Yeah, we have that problem here too, don't we, Howie? Where there are certain plants that can be wiped out that people think are just common.
Well, certainly, and it's that way everywhere, and it's vice versa. There's plants that can't be wiped out that people are cautious about. It's a little mixture of both. And 2 points I want to make. One is a definition of wildcrafting. I had one time I had a group of students, and it was one of those years where snow came really low and stayed low. It was one of those years where, we were driving and we're ready to pick this plant, in class, and we have everybody get all prepared, and we drive up and it's too snowy, so we can't pick that day. But we go ahead and do the class. The students don't even know that. They think we might still pick right up to the very end, because we don't say, "Oh, we're not going to pick." We just continue the class, and then the next week we tell them to go ahead and bring the stuff. We might pick this week, and we go out, and the snow is still not melted. We're going to the third week. We're going up, and someone said, it was to Stephen Yeager, one of the teachers I work with. They said to him, "Well, are we going to wildcraft this week?" And Stephen's like, "We're always wildcrafting."
Yeah.
So the wildcrafting, the part where you gather the plant, that's what people think is wildcrafting. Oh, I'm going to gather a plant.
Right.
But all that looking it takes to learn the system, the locating, the learning the answers, the learning the earth, that's all part of the wildcrafting.
That's part of the
craft.
And
the processing.
I mean, that's part of the craft. You don't,
the processing.
You don't like brew a beer and just show up and suddenly the beer has arrived. It's the whole entire craft, which includes gathering the ingredients and preparing everything. And there's just so much to it. Right.
And then the second point I wanted to make was in talking with Christina here. It's things grow back slow in the desert, and things are on such a different cycle than here. And for us up here, we could say, what's the size of the population? How much is here? The best time to see it is when it's flowering. Right. So you can really see the most of it. But, where Christina's coming from in Mojave and the other deserts down there, a lot of the plants, you might have to look for year after year after year. You might look for 5 or 10 years before that plant actually blooms fully. Because one year you might get rain at the wrong time or not enough, and just some of them come up, but then you come back 3 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, there's this very watery year, and you see how many plants are actually there.
Right.
So even gauging the size of the stand can be so dramatically different. Things are on a much different time frame and schedule to understand what's actually growing, like the ones that disappear but then come up with the rain. So I'm talking about those in particular. And also with thinking about what Christina talking about her lands down there, it's the same thing. There were certain plants that are like weeds, like she's talking about the Sahara mustard, which there's plants like that are weedy or grow in a weedy way that the concern for wildcrafting is much less. And I think it's really important for new wildcrafters to go to plants that you can't possibly hurt and try to pick them as if they were sensitive. Because that's where you're going to gain your skill, is picking plants that aren't sensitive but pretending that they are, and trying to pick in ways that are gentle. Yeah.
That's a very good point. I've seen a lot of people just dig around and come back to places I know have some great plants there, and then I come back and there's holes in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart.
It's frustrating.
Well, people will say, well, the bears leave the holes.
Who says that?
A lot of people say that.
Do they also leave their gloves and their sandwich bags behind? Those darn bears.
They leave poop, but the bears dig Osha, Ligusticum porteri, and they leave big holes.
Mm-hmm.
And current indigenous harvesting of many food plants in arid regions leave big holes,
Mm-hmm.
which in these instances are actually better for the reproduction of those plants. So here's it comes down to with tending a stand. If you're going to, we have stands that we work with that if we harvested a third of the stand, it would leave this massive devastation, and 5 years later it would be the best stand for that plant.
Right.
So we don't do that. And I'm not saying that it's inappropriate to do that. I'm saying unless this is your training from your generations of learning as to how to maintain your own personal family's food stands, as indigenous people may have, or unless you're a bear, and you're just doing it. That most of the people today that I work with, we leave plenty of holes. We know how to leave big impact. It's hard for us to know how to make minimal impact. And I think that's, once again, what we're striving for is a minimal impact now, to understand what that means before thinking about making a positive impact.
Right. Well, coming back in some of the delicate areas like the Mount Hood area and seeing, there was these beautiful, beautiful Valerian Sanchez growing all over the place. And then you come back and there's just nothing but holes. It's just gone. It's just gone, and it doesn't come. At least in the last few years, that's not coming back.
Yeah, which is ridiculous because Valerian Sanchez loves disturbance.
Sure,
and if done properly, at Mount Hood and in other places like that, if you were to harvest a valerian, take most of it, leave a big giant, fill the dirt so it's all messed up, and I all fill the dirt back in. Fill the dirt back in so it's just, loose dirt.
Right.
And then take a piece of that root clump and stick it back in and water it. It's going to love that. It's going to fill that area up.
Yeah.
And you're going to get you come back in a few years and you have valerian growing there and without competition in that spot.
It should have that.
It's a very good thing,
It's not growing into the tire tracks where someone backed their truck up.
Yeah.
And, over where the wild ginger and all of those lovely things are.
Yes.
It's all of my lovely favorite places where I was mushroom hunting, those are also destroyed too. So it leaves a scar with the person that enjoys that area, as well as leaving a scar in the environment. And it makes me just, if somebody asks, well, where did you get that? I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you anything. I'm going to tell you to go to the store and buy this plant. And if it says it was organically grown, then you may have it. And if it says wildcrafted, just don't touch it. That's what I'm going to tell people, because I've seen so much devastation. That's the scar that I'm dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Well, some things then, like personal use pine cones, you did something with pine cones that totally amazed me with sugar, was it? You want to talk about that?
Oh, I have it over there. So I take unripe pinyon pine cones and fill up a mason jar. Just fill up a jar with them, and then you top it off with whatever, like maple syrup, honey. I use brown sugar, but you could use regular sugar.
You don't have to add anything to, you don't have to turn it into syrup. Just put the brown sugar in there.
You just put the brown sugar in there, but you can turn it, even if you're using a base of a syrup, like honey, or if you're doing maple syrup, it's going to take on, or plus you put it out in the sun. So in the desert, I can have this ready in a week. It'll be ready in a week. Yeah. But you have to use unripe pine cones, and it basically turns into the syrup. The brown sugar will turn into a syrup, and it'll end up takes on that flavor of the pine. And what happens is the the pine cones end up opening up and swelling, and then you could pick the nuts out. And so they're very sweet and soft, and they are just open. And we could try it later on. It just tastes really yummy. And so that's what I do with the pine. I play around with with the plants a lot to see how I can work with it. I also one season I picked a bunch of pinyon pine cones, but I picked them like right at the wrong stage. It was like after. Yeah. But so, I was learning, and this is a thing, you're learning. And it still came out great because I still use it. But I sat it out in brown sugar for like months. It sat out for almost a year in the sun, and nothing happened. But the brown sugar crystallized and became really hard. So I ended up blending it up with the pine cones in there, and then I sipped it out the pieces of the woody part of the pine cones, and it ended up being a really lovely pine cone sugar.
Right. So you find a way to use it anyway.
Yeah, I'll find ways to use it. So I do a lot of my baking with that, or dressing desserts with it.
It's a lot of vitamin C.
It's delicious. And you can mix it up with, I also will throw in some needles. So it does have, and I've been also using resin lately in cooking. So I will basically grate resin into oil, that my girlfriend taught me how to do that. Or I just grate it into my batter of cookies or cake that I'm making.
You have some specific way of like rules around how to harvest resin properly. Oh
yeah. Well, a lot of people love resin, and I've been asked to gather for people because
pine tree resin.
Pine tree, pinyon. Well, where I'm at, it's pinyon pine. So people are gathering resin where they're taking it. I mean, we all know you don't peel it from the tree. I look specifically to the ground. And the way that I do it is I observe the tree and I look to see where the resin's coming from. And I always look at the branches and I could see where the wound is. And then I look directly down, and that's where I'm going to see all the resin that's hardened up and come to the ground. So I really stress that point because people, I don't know, in the desert, it's been really popular that people want pine resin. It smells amazing. I see certain companies that are selling it, and I could tell if it's done properly pretty much because I could see that it's aged and it takes on like this amber tone. It's very hard. But people are grabbing where it's still, they're ripping off the wound. They're taking it off from the wound. So I always encourage people that if they're going to gather, to do it respectfully and look, look at above and observe the tree, see how it's going. Don't go straight to the branch. Don't go to the trunk. Right. Look around because it's covered. And I don't like to disturb the soil.
Right. I've seen some pictures of how you do it that you've posted at various points, and it looks incredibly low impact.
Oh, it is.
Really being very careful to leave as much of the soil, like you said, undisturbed.
Undisturbed, yeah. It is big clumps that you could find just laying around. And another thing I like to look for is the downed pinyon trees when I know that they're uprooted. Yeah. If you observe those trees, you'll see there's globs of resin that's on there, and those globs that are just like right near the trunk.
Fallen.
So that's where I go for too, is if I want it just for, if I want to use it for blessing herbs, that's one thing I could do it for. But I really love making oils. So that's why that's my main basis. I don't really cook that as much as I do infuse oils with it.
Nice. It reminds me a little bit, the way that you harvest resin reminds me a little bit of what I've heard about the best way to harvest usnea in our area.
Yeah, when it comes to trees, and I know you're asking me about usnea, but I think I want to talk about trees first.
Yes, let's talk about trees.
And when it comes to talk about trees and shrubs, both those bushes is what often people call shrubs.
The shrubberies.
Yeah. It's really easy to hurt plants that are woody like that. And sometimes not, sometimes yes. But when it comes to trees, what Christina is telling me reminds me of you look at poplar buds, very, very common around here, and people love the poplar buds because it's one of our highest salicylate containing plants, and is so useful for pain, like aspirin, like pain relief. Yeah. And it really makes a difference to be making an oil with those poplar buds.
Sometimes called balm of Gilead.
Oh, yes.
Although it's not the one that's from the Mediterranean area.
No, but It's related.
They go to the same family reunions.
Yes. So those aren't actually flower buds. Those are leaf buds.
Right.
And when you pull one of those buds off in the spring, you're actually not removing a flower. You're removing a whole branch of a tree.
Right.
So you can go and pick those buds off the tree, and you can easily damage or kill a tree. Yeah. That's a major impact. Whereas if you just wait until after one of our many storms, and at that point, there are down branches, and you can gather plenty of them. It just takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And in thinking about Christina harvesting the resin and taking the time and effort, one of the things I consistently work with in wildcrafting is herb lust, the desire to get that herb, the desire to have it now.
Yeah.
I remember talking to herbalists when I was younger who would say, this is what binds us together as herbalists to go out wildcrafting. We lust after these herbs. We want these herbs. We enjoy them, and it's so easy. You got to start picking. It's so much fun. Yeah. Next thing you know, you have 2 years worth. Yeah. Next thing you know, it's like getting dark and you don't know where the car is. Right. That happens to me just like picking blackberries,
right.
It's like after a while.
Yeah.
But what we try to teach at Columbines as a major point is that there's plenty of herb and plenty of time.
Yes.
And to be able to say, I don't need this today. I can come back later. I can watch it. I can find a better place, or maybe there is a better place. Don't even know if there is one.
Right.
These kinds of things are, the questions we have. So it's okay to wait till the tree falls down. And once again, it comes down to what are you wildcrafting? You asked me about sustainable wildcrafting. And the thing is where do I see sustainable wildcrafting? It's on some product.
Right.
So if you're talking about commercial wildcrafting, that's not really what this is. That's not what this podcast is even about. We're talking about us as herbalists going out and connecting with the earth. Yeah. We're talking about personal use wildcrafting, or even if we are making a small amount for friends and family, that's a very small amount compared to supplying the country.
Going to multiple stores.
Yeah, and getting that pine resin bathroom toilet bowl cleaner, right. It's like it's suddenly a different amount, So that's what I was thinking about was the care and going slow and with shrubs and it's different here in the Pacific Northwest because things grow back really quickly and
they do.
You dig a small hole in the woods, it fills in a few years.
Right. That's why what she was talking about with the resin reminded me of the usnea and I can't remember. I wish I could remember who taught me, but the person that taught me said never ever take new usnea off a living tree. Yeah. Only pick it off the ground. Oh yes. Only on branches that have already fallen.
Yes.
And period. Absolutely. And the person, whoever you are, I'm sorry, I can't remember who you were. Mm-hmm. But that herbalist said part of the reason that you do that is because usnea helps the tree to breathe and helps keep the general respiratory system of the tree in good health. And at the time, I didn't really understand what that interaction really was, but I got it that that's a community, the tree and the usnea. That's a plant community. Yeah. And it's not my place to start wrecking homes. So I'm going to take it off the ground where the tie has already been severed.
Well, if you pick it off the ground, then more will fall to the ground. If you pick it off the tree, if you pick it from the top of the tree, how's it going to fall down to the bottom parts of the tree? How's it going to fall down to the ground?
Yeah.
So if you pick it up from the ground, that's where it's the lichens. I know Christina's been looking at lichens and going, what are these?
Well, because it doesn't happen where I live.
Yeah, it's very rare.
You need a good damp environment for those.
And we have many lichens, and when it comes to lichens, it's just, to me, they're a little bit harder to understand, to put yourself in their place, because they're not one organism, they're two.
Yeah.
They're an algae.
And sometimes three.
And sometimes three or more.
Yep.
Yeah, they're like an algae that needs the water and changes sunlight into energy. And then there's a fungus that can change sunlight to energy. And so you have an algae covered with a fungus.
Yeah.
And they're living together, hanging out. And a lot of them are really old. You start looking at some of these lichens that are It could be many, many, many years old, or it could be way older than you.
Yeah, you could be
So-
looking at a tree that's a couple hundred years old, and some of the lichen on it has been around since the very beginning.
Right. So, I'm in awe at how different they are, and I'm glad that Usnea is remaining. The lichen started to become very popular for a while, and
Yeah,
I'm glad that it's kind of fizzled out in popularity because there are many other plants that we could use instead of that.
yes.
Having it be local is nice because it's local and we can use it, but it's very, very light. And when people start harvesting that commercially, and you're looking at, so how do you get 1,000 pounds of Usnea? You know, it's
Yeah.
like how many pickup truckloads is that?
Yeah,
It's quite a
that's
few.
Quite a few.
You try to
it's
do that
scary.
on the open market, it can be very scary, and it is.
Yeah.
It once again, it's like as we know on Real Herbalism Radio, there isn't really that one herb you have to have.
No, there really
Yeah.
isn't.
There's always one by you that does almost the same thing.
Or maybe what's actually even better for you.
That's right.
Because sometimes some of the effects aren't exactly what is really best for you.
Just because it's popular don't mean it's the best thing for you.
Yeah.
There are companies out there, and I'm going to do this little thing that I always do when we talk about this is if you have an herbal company, do not put a contract out on the herb. Contract with a wild crafter. If it really has to be wild crafted, it really, really does, have a contract with the wild crafter themselves, someone that you have been working with that has proof about what their sustainability is. And if it comes to the point where you've discovered it can be grown on a farm instead, that's your option because you are making a big impact. There are companies out there that they just put the contract out. We're looking for this herb, and that is so irresponsible. Having worked in the herb industry for many, many years, I know what the effects are of that, and that's toxic. That hurts us all. That's not good medicine.
Well, putting a contract on the herb is just that.
Yeah.
Putting a contract out on
That's
the herb.
right. So what
Yeah.
happens
Yeah.
is companies like the ones that I used to work with would get phone calls from people say, hey, this company put a contract out on the Valerian citrus, for example, and my friend was at the end of the line, and so he has a truck full of this and would like to sell it to you at a really good rate right now. And my response was, of course, as the herb buyer, I won't buy that. I don't buy it from pirates. That's you. The learning place for you is I feel bad about that. Find somewhere else. But I am not going to be part of making sure that person damages the environment again and again. It says, well, it'll be wasted, but next year it won't. So please learn from this. I'm sorry you're in a bad space, but I'm not going to buy the thing that destroys the home that I live in.
Well, one of the key points in wildcrafting is coming back next year to see what kind of impact you make.
Yeah.
And that's like the key. That's like the key of the whole thing. I've been many of the older generation than me, as if there is one, of herbalists that, you know, that's how they figured this stuff out.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how you can have a stand of food for generations in your family, because
Yeah.
you come back if you don't come back. And I've seen this problem here, and even more so in the desert, because, you know, you cut a branch in the desert, and that branch, you see that for many, many, many years. Here, there's so much biomass, it grows out pretty quick, you know.
Yeah.
But it's like people will go and they'll harvest a certain way because they think that's the right way. And I've seen many stands in Arizona and in California where the plants have been harvested improperly, and the branches slowly die over the next like 15 or 20 years. You know, it's like, well, it's kind of amazing. It's kind of harsh. If the people came back and saw that type of wildcrafting and taking that piece in that way is doing this to the plant, they wouldn't continue to do it that way. They switch the other way, which might be, you know, might be better. But if you don't come back, you don't know. And if you keep coming to different stands every year and doing it, then you leave a trail of sick and dying plants.
Right.
Which is anyway.
Yeah, that's very true.
So I have a question for both of you. For folks, whether they're wanting to wildcraft to actually do picking or just getting to know the plants, on trail, off trail. Should people be going off trail Or should they be sticking to the trails?
Where I'm at, I feel that you have to stick on the trail. But I actually, the places that I go to are not on, I go off. I'm not even on the trail. I drive offside the road. There's no trail.
Okay.
But I'm mindful of where I walk. And that's where I'm noticing a lot of people don't pay attention to where they're hiking through.
So what are some of the things, the keys, if you are going off trail in the desert, for instance, what are some of the key ways to properly walk through that area?
Well, we got to be mindful because we're here, nothing pokes you here.
Right. Yeah.
And there, it's like there's down cholla. There's you got to be really careful for your own safety because if you're not wearing the proper clothing, you're going to get hurt. Wildlife. So you got to be in wildlife too, and be mindful of if you're going for a plant, for instance, yerba santa or brittle bush. If you're going for a plant like that, you got to be mindful because rattlers like to hide underneath these plants. They like the shade. So a lot of these plants, even the creosote bush, they provide a lot of shade where you don't see the critters. So you have to be very cautious, like scorpions and rattlesnakes is a big thing. One of my biggest things is just, okay, so that's one thing, your safety. Another thing is don't disturb an area that we have an issue with tortoises. They're endangered, so you want to be mindful of it. So if you see a den, don't go near it. Something that the national park just recently posted that I thought, or Joshua Tree National Park just posted that thought was really nice, was that a way to know if you're close enough to an animal is by holding your thumb out. And if you can see the critter from far, if you can still see it with your thumb up, you're too close. But the further you go and you have your thumb held out, and then you
if you line up your thumb as if you were covering up the animal from the,
and if you can't, yeah, and so if you basically want to get to the point where you're so far away that you're covering up with your thumb. Nice. You have to be mindful of the critters as well. The rabbits, especially the tortoises are a big issue because people want to get close to them. So when I'm gathering, I am actually paying attention to the life that's around me. Right. It's not so much about going off trail. I'm looking at, what life is around me. So that's a big thing to be careful of. And I don't like to pick off the trail per se because I don't want, somebody that's been peeing on a bush, like that's the kind of things I think about when I'm gathering. Yeah. So I walk in an area where it's not going to be disturbing or threatening any life. And that's how I do it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Well, it's kind of a tricky question because on a podcast, you don't want to tell people to be going off the trail.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, in my work, I would say that there's a couple of reasons to leave the trail. One is contamination, pollution. I figure brewski zone. You want to get out of the brewski zone, which is how far a person will carry a cooler of beer. You get beyond there.
That's a good one.
And then you kind of it's a little bit cleaner, Yeah. But I'm not saying that everyone should go off the trail. It really depends on where you are and the people who are listening to this. They're in many different places.
Right.
I've been to places where you go into this setting, the wood setting, and you're not allowed to leave the trail, and the place looks pristine. Mm-hmm. And everywhere around there, because of the number of people and the way people use it, the native flora is gone.
Right.
So to tell someone, go into this place and go off the trail is inappropriate.
Right.
However, there's a lot of places where it's okay to be off the trail if you're going to harvest. And another thing I think about it is that I like to leave the plants on the trail for the people on the trail who will never leave the trail. Right. So that's kind of an essential thing. Plus, if you actually are in national park or public lands, they're going to tell you not on the trail. Not in the campground. They're going to want you to walk away. However, I also would once again say to those who are listening to the podcast that if you have to wonder about on the trail, off the trail, you probably shouldn't be harvesting there.
You should probably be staying on the trail and just observing.
Right. And go to the other places where that's not an issue. Like, for example, if we start talking about plants like blackberry. Well, blackberry root is a wonderful astringent and has all these uses that, we could spend a whole podcast just on blackberry root. And I hear in your backyard you have was that you pick blackberry root out in the back edge there?
Exactly.
Like, was it 15 cents a pound or something?
Yeah.
That's great. Well, it's kind of a joke, but here you can pick 100% of the blackberry root, and that's not going to even touch the stand.
Right.
It's going to come back and take over your house in 5 years.
Yes, and it has been trying to. Yeah. And I hadn't even thought about doing the U-pick, but honestly, if you've got any herbal friends who want to U-pick back there. Right.
So that type of plant, okay. So we look at in our area, St. John's wort. There are places in the woods where people are getting paid reclamation to remove the St. John's wort that's going into these native places.
Yeah.
Okay. With the right connection, you can pick it off the tree. You would still want to pick it on the trail because for pollution, but so there are plants that like that, we in our area we have mullein. Okay, once again, you don't want to be on the trail. You don't want to be right on the side of the walk, but you're not going to damage those mullein stands.
Right.
They're going to go away when the disturbance is gone, and then if you drive your car over that area, it's going to come back.
Right.
Those are the plants, the ones that you plant in your garden and they don't grow, but then even you keep planting it, but then over in the driveway, they all come up.
They're all up there.
Yeah. Those are the plants that if you're not used to wildcrafting, you focus on those plants, you can get a full materia medica, you can get all the dietary needs you want off of those plants, be it here or even be it in the desert where Christina's from, because there are plants like that are either growing in disturbed areas like the mustard, or plants that are weedy in their environment, meaning you can pick a plant and unless you destroy the environment, it's going to come right back because it likes disturbance.
Right.
And these are the plants you're looking for, is to start with the ones that you can't hurt.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, usually for myself, I try most often when I leave the trail, it's often usually mushroom season.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm leaving the trail for mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm leaving the trail usually in areas that I know will eventually be logged.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that I'm doing the best I can to not create excess disturbance, but I also know someone's going to come and destroy the area soon. That doesn't mean I should create more destruction, but I feel like if I accidentally screw something up and step on the wrong plant, it's not necessarily going to be like a long-term problem. If that makes sense. It sounds horrible. but I mean, I think about that and I try to step as lightly, like literally I try to watch where my feet are falling and not stomp on things. Mm-hmm. Push the fern aside as I'm stepping down so that I'm stepping on the ground and not on the fern, for instance.
Luckily, in our area here, in the Cascades, in the Western Cascades, in the places you're probably going to pick mushrooms, most of those plants can be stepped on.
Yeah,
You're not really going to hurt them. And
and I'm aware of that, but I feel like it's important for me to practice that because there could be a time when I'm in an area where it isn't okay to step on the plants.
Well, there you go.
Or there could be a plant there that, for whatever reason, has managed to grow up in this area, and I don't want to step on it. So I feel like it's just intelligent and respectful.
Just like picking the plants you can't hurt as if they were sensitive.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That in time, so then you end up going someplace like an area in the desert that's much more sensitive, and you're practiced on it.
You're already,
Worst case scenario, you just learn to respect, and respect is part of the healing tradition.
Yeah,
for sure. Wow. Well, thank you very much for both of you for being here. I appreciate hearing your wisdom about wildcrafting and the two different areas, Howie and Christina.
Thank you.
Now we need to know, how do we get a hold of you? Christina, let's start with you.
My website, everyleafspeaks.com, and on there I have links to my social media on Instagram and Facebook.
Howie?
Let's see, it's going to be www.botanicalstudies.net, and of course there's the Columbine School of Botanical Studies page, and like us on Facebook, Columbine School of BS on Instagram, and
Nice. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay. And you know what we always say?
Put an herb on it.
All of those shirts.
Statements made about herbs and products on this podcast have not been evaluated by the United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. All information provided on this podcast or any affiliated websites is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for advice from your physician or other healthcare professional. You should not use the information on this podcast and its affiliate websites for a diagnosis or treatment of any health problem. Always consult a healthcare professional before starting any new vitamin supplements, diet, or exercise program before taking any medication.